So thanks a lot. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very, very pleased and privileged to be here. To be honest, I hadn't prepared to speak too much about Bavarian Nordic, but now having the opportunity anyhow, let me just put a few words on our cause we are here for. So fundamentally, I believe that you need to earn your rights to be somewhere, right? And I think that the reason why we have earned our rights is fundamentally because we want to work with governments to make this world a safer place to live in. And earlier today at the Biological Weapons Convention, the Under-Secretary General, he put up a very interesting remark that I want to repeat here. And he actually asked, what would have happened if MERS or yellow fever has been spread deliberately? And just reflecting on the fact that we nowadays are asking ourselves these questions, that for me it tells that we have a world at change these days. We have a world where we gotta look out for these kind of risks and threats and at least discuss what do we do about it. And we hopefully can be one of those preparedness partners for discussion and can bring solutions to the table either shorter term or longer term. Because Bavarian Nordic, as you probably know, is a biotech company with a, you can say, fairly simple business model, a public-private partnership model, where we work with governments to first of all develop our vaccines, but also further produce them and put them to the markets. And then by that helping the respective populations and first-line responder communities in the various countries to better be protected for these kind of threats here. And let me give you an interesting little example. Back in 2010, Bavarian Nordic had a construct, and that's basically, you can argue, one unit of a vaccine, one construct that had full protection for Ebola. And keep in mind, Ebola is not Ebola. Ebola are three different diseases, Zaire, Sudan, and Marburg. We had a construct giving full protection for Ebola. We couldn't get funding to further develop that product because Ebola was not an issue back then. Ebola was a little African disease, killing a few Africans here and there, popping up. We have known Ebola since 76, mid-70s, but it was not an issue, so we couldn't get funding. And what happened that day where that one single Americans came to the US soil with Ebola? The phone rang to Bavarian Nordic, and the dollars were floating in. Please develop this vaccine. And again, this very single special example reminds me maybe on the nutshell we are basically maneuvering in. How are we treating and dealing with these kind of threats and diseases that are so tough for us to really get our grasp on? How do we reflect and discuss either opportunities or preparedness plans for these kind of diseases? Because we don't know how they're going to reappear. We don't know whether it will be natural or whether it will be deliberate. But what I can say is that the stakeholders we are discussing with around the globe are more and more concerned about these elements here, and that's why I'm spending quite some time going out to various countries and discuss with people like you, with governmental stakeholders and so forth. And particularly that there are one area that is remaining as one key concern right now. And it was put very, very elegantly by Kim Won-soo earlier today. He said there's a revolutionary development in science and technology. And in my more simple language, there's a revolution in terms of biosynthesis. So nowadays, you can create and develop these genomes from scratch, basically just looking at the genome description. And we have seen a very, very rapid development in this technology, which gives us a beautiful avenue for developing more effective medicines for a lot of diseases. But it also has the flip side. If this technology ends with people with the wrong agenda, so probably some of these non-state actors, then I think you would agree that we have a certain challenge we're going to address one way or the other. And hopefully you see Bavarian Nordic as one of those partners that can support you with that challenge and bring solutions to the table over the years to come. So I think I will not take too much time, again, branding and promoting what we're doing and what we're thinking, but I would rather probably ask you a couple of reflective questions. And the first one goes around how we wanted to respond to these aspects, challenges going forward. Do we want to remain to be a reactive thinker and do something when it's required on the spot? Ebola is a fantastic example of that. Because regardless of the fact that the world community turned around that challenge very, very quickly, efficiently, put resources there, channeled funds and so forth, let's be honest, we were not prepared for that challenge. So I think a fair question would be, do we want to stay reactive, so we act when we have or we see the issue when we're in the middle of it, as we have done historically, or do we see an opportunity to be more proactive in the way we are thinking and acting? So that's one set of questions. The other question I want to reflect on is whether our current setup, preparedness setup, is really make us confident that if something happens, this would in reality work efficiently when we start applying those strategies. Let me just give you a little example. All the smallpox preparedness plans I have seen around the world, and that's a vast number, all of them are building on two main foundations. One, quick detection, and ring vaccination. It's a little bit interesting that with a genome where you have an incubation period of 12 to 14, 15 days, that you can talk about quick detection. In this global community, where over the last 30 years you have seen a huge increase in mobility. So imagine where you are in a window of 12 to 14 days. You are all over the place. And the global community is all over the place. So that main foundation, quick detection, when you start applying that around an awful disease like smallpox, something starts to dismantle here. It does make sense. And the other set of that, the ring vaccination part, I mean, that also requires that you know where people are. How can you else contain them? So those two foundations in the smallpox preparedness plan we see across the world, I would dare you that if we suddenly stand with the issue that smallpox is reappearing one way or the other, I can tell you havoc will start because the plans will not work. It's quite simple. So I think as a responsible leader, as a responsible governmental agency, I think it's fair to ask yourself the question, these preparedness plans we have in place for all kinds of these diseases, how would they work in reality? Not how they work on a piece of paper, but in reality. And the final question I want to raise is whether we basically have an obligation to protect our first-line response community the best way we can. And that goes along a lot of different means, protective gear, medicines, vaccines, and so forth. But do we fundamentally have an obligation to protect our first-line response community the best we can? And the second part of that, do we have an obligation or an opportunity to secure equal access to protection for all our population, also the vulnerable communities with skin diseases, HIV, who has gone through liver transplants or organ transplants and so forth, who are vulnerable for a lot of these older vaccines sitting in our stockpile. And again, Ebola was an awful event in many, many ways, but I do hope that now we have gotten beyond it, that event would dare to challenge us a little bit and ask some of these questions here, because Ebola was again a very good example on what it would mean when you don't have, or what it would cost you when you don't have a first-line response setup that are prepared. And you have all seen the awful pictures of basically hospitals closing down because the nurses were dying. And if they were not dying, they were going on strike, so the hospitals could not work. And you have seen the awful pictures with patients basically dying outside the hospitals because they couldn't get in and get treatment right. So I think what I would leave you with are those three more reflective questions. And we, of course, are happy to take part of discussing this. And let me just remind you, as my final note, that our business model is not like Big Pharma. And very often, maybe it's the tie, maybe it's the suit, I don't know, but very often we are being put into the same category. But hold on, Jesper, you only think about money. You only go into areas when your spreadsheet makes sense, right? Our business model is very, very different. We go in these very rare diseases because it matters. But it also takes the other point, and that is the public-private partnership model we have. We cannot act, we cannot survive without the active support of governments. And that's why I'm very, very pleased to be back in India here. It's now my 4th visit. So I'm very pleased to be back here and discuss with the stakeholders, and hopefully we can support you being a more safer place to live.
Welcome to this episode of Eureka. This institute is more than about 60 years old. So this is the first institute probably in the world to give the concept of oral vaccine. So on cholera and leishmania, this institute is worldwide known. Jawaharlal Nehru, many of them actually inspired that there should be an institute like that, which is striving for understanding the parasite biology and major epidemics in the country and develop the drugs for that.
Watch Eureka with Professor Samit Chattopadhyay, Director, CSIR IICB Kolkata, only on Rajya Sabha TV.
To be specific, what we are worried about as a nation on the whole, that we were focusing earlier on natural disasters. The most important and which was for centuries, I would say, was the drought. And many of our states were affected by drought. But then our government of India made such strategies that today we hardly talk of drought, because there are so many arrangements now to combat the drought. Those strategies are in practice, are in place, in vogue, and we hardly talk of that. We talk of flood now, we talk of tsunamis, we talk of earthquake. Then what happened to earthquake? What happened to drought? It's very important to make your policy, lay down your strategies, put your guidelines and make your plans. That strategy will work if you plan like that, because you have to have a policy in the country. It was in 2010, 2005, for the first time, the National Disaster Management Authority was instituted by Government of India. I was a founder member under the vice chairmanship of General N.C. Vij, retired Chief of Army Staff, and Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. And we were 7 more members. And when we looked into this area, we found that Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the Honorable Prime Minister, earlier than that had thought of this in his vision and had made a special group which came out with the roadmap that how should we go about it. And based on those recommendations, this Act, National Disaster Management Act, was instituted. In 2007, we put a national policy in place. And national policy talks about both man-made disasters as well as natural disasters. In brief, I can only apprise you that national policy tells us to involve one and all, including the community and the government, and everyone, their role to play in the prevention, preparedness, and so that prevention, we all say prevention is better than cure. So we must work on those lines. But the sad news today is that just now our friend's father is admitted with chikungunya, so many malaria cases, so many dengue cases. Africa is plugged with so many diseases, emerging diseases like Ebola, like Zika. It means tomorrow there may be another, there was a pandemic of AIDS which we could tackle all over the world. But we should be prepared, not knowing that we should tackle only chikungunya or dengue, but any emerging infections. So we have to have a mechanism in place to do the survey, round-the-clock survey for anything that is abnormal in the atmosphere. And in India, we have instituted a program, which is a surveillance program, instituted in 100 districts of our country with the help of WHO, and that is progressing slowly, because subsequently WHO did not give much of funds. Government of India has gone slow on this, but it will be probably extended soon to other districts. We have about 623 districts in our country. Maybe more because a couple of more states have come in. Those districts have not counted. So if you have a continuous survey program, surveillance program, you can work on the biological disasters or emerging diseases, or the latest trend is terrorism. And today, if you talk of CBRNE, blast is E. I just finish it here by saying E is the blast explosive. It's taking a place every day, every corner, in every city, in many countries. Middle East, you see that. In India, we are not spared out of that. And now talk of CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear. Now, we are all scared that there may not be a nuclear holocaust. Well, chances are less, certainly less. But there are some mad people, dictators, who might think of these things. Well, preparedness against Holocaust is hardly possible to save yourself for such a thing. But only thing, deterrence, if your neighbor have got one hockey to hit you, you should have two hockeys to hit him. So that is the only way that is deterrent. So those who have deterrence probably will prevent such a Holocaust. But then those nuclear materials in the form of accidents or radiological dirty bombs and things like that are possibilities through the hands of state actors or non-state actors in the world. And you all know what is happening about non-state actors also. And now they're trying to recognize themselves as state actors itself. IS is not just a non-state actor now. They want to have a part of the whole world as ISIS country, larger country. So we must save our country. We must save our continent. We must save our world. That should be the policy on that part. So radiological accidents have occurred. You all must have heard, those who are reading the newspapers and journalists and all. Mayapuri accident. You must have heard. We lost 2 people at that time by an exposure of a leak of from a cobalt plant, accidentally, from a university chemistry department, junk lying there, For 30 years, somebody thought to sell it off as a scrape, iron scrape, and he went into the iron mandi, and two of the Agarwal's brothers, friends, divided that lead pencil, so-called, say, there's a very, very costly pencil, into two halves, and they put them in their pockets. Went home, and they burnt their backside. In the night, that purse used to go under the pillow, so they became bald, and by the time 30 days, 21 days have passed, and that's the time they came to the doctors. And even doctors were at loss. What has happened? This kind of scald, this kind of burn, this kind of hair loss? Why? Why at particular one place? Except one lady in Apollo Hospital, she was a radiation medicine specialist, wife of a DRDO scientist. She noticed that, oh, this is a radiological burn. This is from the radiation burns. So such accidents cannot be ignored. We did a complete analysis and audit of all our nuclear plants after that, as member of NDMA and all that. We went to all the plants and we found that we are quite safe as our nuclear plants are concerned. We take all precautions based on the international guidelines on that. Coming to biological. Now, biological and chemical are two disasters, man-made disasters, which can play havoc with the country, economy of the country, political system of the country, the population of the country. Chemical, by history, by known facts, have been used between two wars, between two enemies. If I want to destroy one battalion of 1,000 people straight away, so I just spray some gas, some poisonous gas, and immediate result is there. But then you have now masks, self-breathing apparatuses, everything you have taken protection measures like that. What about biological? No, biological you don't have to give a warning. You either mix little bit of salmonella, little bit of typhoid germ into water, and that is the end of it. When Commonwealth Games were taking place, I was given the charge to look after the prevention of contamination of water for Delhi supply. So we did the complete audit. We ensured that water cannot be polluted by germs or by chemicals. So such strategies have to be put in place around the clock, throughout, and for future. There are international strategies laid down which we follow, OYO and all this, by and large. But I can tell you the plans differ from country to country, the place to place. I remember when there was a threat of H5N1, that is the bird flu. And we made a strategy. We trained our people, first responders. We sealed our borders, land, water, and air, all this thing, and screened everyone coming in. Prevention of people unnecessary travel. All those things, restrictions were put. And we are proud to say that we didn't have no significant number of bird flu. For swine bird flu. But then few years later we had bird flu, H1N1. And tomorrow it may be H7N1. So if you have the machinery in place, we developed a strategy and instituted in all these states. Number of states were affected more than the others, and we had a lot of resistance. Many kind of things happen in such strategies. To quote you two examples only. In Gujarat, it was in Surat industrial hub, large number of cases of bird flu were taking place. Immediately we got the call from the Director of Health Services to NDMA and saying that, sir, what should we do? I said, all right. My vice chairman said, Bhardwaj, you go there. You being a doctor as well as you have made these strategies, see what are the deficiencies, how it is happening. As we know, we are a country which is secular, which is all religion people, everybody stay under one roof peacefully. One death had occurred from bird flu, who happens to be a Muslim gentleman. And the whole crowd was insisting that we will take the body and bury it. But my strategy will not permit to bury. My strategy was to burn, to cremate by burning. Because if you leave that dead body like that, this is a bomb. So to convince that crowd of over 100 people, I had to talk to the elder people of that community, told them, want to put them on risk, and very nice of them that they all agreed. They said, you take the body whatever you like. We will not do any of the methods. If we take it, we do our methods. I said, fine. So such strategies, minor ones, but they are very important ones that you have to do. Second incident, I went to Tamil Nadu. Cases were coming up. They didn't have laboratory facilities to test. So I had carried a couple of PCRs with me. First I gave them. Then I said, follow my strategy. Strategy was, don't give Tamiflu tablets to anybody who's getting fever. Whereas Chief Minister had ordered the people that every person getting fever must get Tamiflu. I said, everybody came there, Chief Secretary, everybody, Health Secretary, DG Health, up to CMO level we had called in that meeting in Chennai. And Chief Secretary said, look doctor, you come from Delhi, we don't follow you, we will follow what my Chief Minister says, because Tamiflu has to be given. And I don't want any death, this is my Chief Minister said. I said, all right. Firstly, we will not give you Tamiflu, because it's a controlled item from the central government. Even if you manage to get it, you take it and all your patients will become resistant. Then don't come back to Delhi. Think about it. So he thought for a moment and then he said his health DG, he says, is he right? He says, sir, absolutely right. Then why don't you speak then? He said, sir, since you were speaking, I didn't speak. So very simple. So anyway, they agreed to that and they said, we will not give Tamiflu and we will follow the strategies for prevention. So we have different plans to be modified to the situations that we face. One of the most important thing biological is you prepare yourself, this thing is the vaccination, immunization. Now, all of you will say, if somebody tells me, take your child for smallpox vaccination, you all say, no, it was eradicated in 1999. Why should we have it? But I say, today there are vaccines which are vaccines which prevent infection by any strain of smallpox which are retained in many countries. And those must be thought when we are talking of prevention. So, ladies and gentlemen, I finish my statement here saying that disaster risk reduction is a multi-pronged effort by each and every citizen of this country, of the world, so that we can protect ourselves from natural and man-made disasters. Thank you.
Thank you.